Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni. I'm the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for the Texas Elementary Principal Association. Each week, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and just have them come on and share some of their story in hopes that it helps you tell some of yours. I am thrilled this week to have my special guest, Michael Hynes, on. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Thank you, Todd. It's a real privilege to be speaking with you. I'm a superintendent of schools in the state of New York. I've been in field education for over 23 years, former elementary principal, elementary teacher, and I've been fortunate enough to serve, 3 school districts as a superintendent over the past 9 years. And it never feels like a day of work because when you love what you do, it's really the best thing in the world. So I'm really fortunate.
Well, I'm excited to have tonight's conversation because I think you are my first superintendent that I've had on this podcast. I mean, I'm getting close to 100 episodes now, so I'm excited. But I want to start from kind of the beginning with you. Did you always know you wanted to be in education?
No, I actually, in fact, when I was a student, I hated school very much. I graduated actually, ironically enough, in the bottom 10% of my class in high school. Yeah, it's really interesting. So it is the ultimate irony that I am, not only was I a teacher, but now as a superintendent. And I think I just see things through a somewhat of a different lens as far as what my purpose is and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And yeah, so I didn't know until I was in my mid 20s, that I wanted to. I knew I wanted to serve people in some capacity, but not really sure how to serve children. And then we all have serendipitous moments, and I was very fortunate.
So tell me a little bit about what you said a minute ago about just school was not the place for you. What do you think made it such a not fantastic experience for you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I think it's still indicative today of many of our schools, regardless of what state we are in. I don't think schools are designed to draw out or reduce the talents and passions of our kids. So I think I fell into purgatory. I wasn't quite at the top, and I'd like to think I wasn't quite, struggling per se. I just got lost. I didn't really have relationships with the adults that I was working with as a student, meeting with teachers, and so I just think I got lost, and there were really no safety nets in the 70s and 80s as much as there are today, and rightfully so. So I became disenfranchised, and if it wasn't for tennis, I think that is the one thing that kept me going, knowing that I had to at least do somewhat decently in school in order to play, and be eligible. But yeah, I still, again, I still think it's indicative of many of our students. They graduate and they don't know what they're good at or how good they can be at something, and to me, it's just the ultimate tragedy.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head. And I love when we have people in leadership positions who have that same understanding where they haven't lost it over the years. I gotta say though, on a completely side note, I love to know that you played tennis in high school because that was my sport.
Oh,
And
all
I
right.
wish I could still play now, but nobody I know plays tennis. And so I'm like so rusty and don't ever get to play.
Yeah,
But
me either.
totally off topic. But so you decided, you were going to move into education. You became a teacher. At some point, you knew you wanted to be an administrator. And, when I think about my path, I didn't know I wanted to be an administrator till pretty soon before it happened. And then
Yeah,
it kind of fell in, and it was like,
yeah,
okay, I think I can do this.
yeah.
But one thing that I always knew from the start is I never wanted to be a superintendent. So tell me about your path and how you
Yeah.
got from that mindset of I'm going to work with kids to I want to work as a campus leader to I want to work as a district leader.
Yeah, you're a smart man for not doing that. It's interesting. There's nothing like having your 25, 27 kids when you're a teacher, right? And because you former principal, right? When you're a principal, you have either 450 kids or 500 kids. And I knew as a superintendent, in order to really enact the change and have the influence that I wanted for all of my students, I just felt it's the only way you can do it from a policy perspective, from a community perspective, and I just don't think it's rocket science, to be honest with you. For anyone to be a superintendent, I think you need a lot of patience, but you need people skills. You need to be empathetic. Most important, you need to be a good listener. and I'm not good at a lot of things, but I think I'm good at those three things, and I think that's enabled me to try to move a school district from here to here, so to speak, from A to B, and with always a child at the center. And I'm not a good number two, and that's one thing I've learned about myself. So um, I'm okay to be a number two for a little while, but once I know I believe I have the skill sets and the vision to do something, then I need to be in the driver's seat. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but it's something I do know about myself. So
I love that so much. Well, one of the reasons I always said I never would be a superintendent is because just the amount of people you have to deal with and the personalities and how everything in the end, as a principal, everything on that campus falls on my shoulders
yeah,
and I'm there every day. But as a superintendent, you've got multiple campuses and they all fall on you. And so
yeah.
how do you not allow the weight of that pressure and the negativity that often surrounds that? How do you not let that consume you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just finished a book, and it's called Staying Grounded. And I think that's really the most important thing as an administrator, and I know you know this, is that you don't want to get lost in your office and you don't want to become disconnected. So there are 12 principles that I follow. And one of the things that I follow, and I think a lot of successful people do, is they have routines in the morning that sets the stage for their day. So I have a series of things that I do before I even get in my car to drive to work. And then even when I'm there, I have certain things that I do before I start seeing or speaking to everybody. And I think once I'm grounded in that way, it enables me to be in fifth gear or sixth gear for the remainder of that day. But you also have to replenish yourself. You have to know when you're starting to tap out mentally and when to recharge and all those different things. But you also have to embrace that massive responsibility. You can't run away from it. You have to know that you have to know that's what you're getting into. And I think there's some people who are either built for it or they can be built in some capacity over time to get to that way. But you have to know it's a massive responsibility. And that's why, I take care of myself physically and mentally, spiritually, in every single way, because what's more important than serving thousands of kids and hundreds of staff members or even thousands of staff members? There's nothing more important. So, you got to take it very seriously. And I don't know. I think some of us are wired that way to want that responsibility, so I'm
Well,
fortunate.
one thing that I've really been drawn to you on social media is you are such a positive, consistent force on social media. We've never met in person. I've never worked for you in your school district, but I love every day seeing things come across my feed where it's a powerful leadership comment or it's always that positive mindset. And I will tell you, working under several very different superintendents that I've worked under over the years, that makes a difference to the people that work under you to know that you have that mindset of things can be better, things will be better. I believe in it. I believe in you. I believe in our kids. Do you get any of the feedback from your staff about those kind of things making a difference for them?
Yeah, it's and I appreciate you noticing that. I think it is important to have that very positive mindset, and I start every day with I put something out on social media, on my own personal Twitter feed and the district one as well, because I want that messaging to get across. And I'm actually surprised how many parents and how many students actually read it. So I just think it's incredibly important because it does. You are the thermostat for the district. The way that you go about your business. One of the things I do is I shadow students every single year, and so I think it's incredibly important for superintendents, for school administrators to never forget what it's like to be a student and what it's like to be a teacher. And the best way to do that is to follow them for the day and then collapse in your bedroom when you're done, because you realize how hard they actually have to work. And when you make those decisions as an administrator, when you're sending out positive messages and you're meeting them where they are, I just think it goes pretty far.
Well, and I will tell you, what I have often found myself is that, I try to be a really positive force on social media as well. And what I have found time and time again is your words, especially those you're sharing out in writing and publicly, impact so many people, and most of them will never tell you.
That's
And
right.
when I have been speaking at different things, or I've had a teacher come to me and say, "Thank you so much for just being and sending those things out," I don't ever tell you, but every time it's what I need to hear. Da, da, da. And I think that's why it's so important that we live in a world so overcome with negativity. And I think something that you understand as well is, I did as a teacher, I did not understand the amount of negativity that administrators handle. And
Yeah,
when I became a principal, that was one of the biggest shockers for me is
sure.
you have kid issues, you've got teacher issues, and you've got parent issues, and you've got central office issues. And
Yep.
as the leader, everybody's coming to you with all their problems, and they're upset if you don't solve them at their speed. And I can
It's
just
true.
imagine as a superintendent
Yeah,
that exemplified. So my question that I want to lead into that is, most of my audience is educators.
yeah.
And what would you say is a great way that educators can support their superintendents?
Wow. Educators supporting superintendents.
Because
I've
one
never
thing I
been.
talk about quite often now, when I do presentations and things, is the importance of the educator supporting their school principal, because it's such a lonely position, because
Is
you have to carry so much weight that you can't share with them. And as a superintendent, it's even more lonely because you're literally the only one in the district. And
yeah, yeah.
so how can teachers best support our superintendents?
It's a great question. I would say, probably the number one way is to don't don't be fearful to talk to the superintendent and tell them. Don't be a bobblehead. That is the one thing. If I ask a question, they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, whatever you want." That is the worst thing that can happen to me, because then I'm not making informed decisions. You won't hurt my feelings if you tell me something that you think I don't want to hear. That's not the case at all, because it's always about the way someone shares it as opposed to what they're sharing. And for me is, if there's an initiative out there that, you think that I need to see it through from a different perspective, or there's something down the pike that you think I should know about, or a superintendent should know, believe it or not, they actually want to know. And it's incredibly important that they hear it from the teachers who are at the ground level serving kids. I mean, that is as important as the information that's reliable and valid. That's as good as it gets. So, don't be scared to share information with your superintendent. And if their ego is in check for superintendents, I don't know how many are, but if they are intact, they are welcoming that type of feedback.
I think that's excellent advice. Well, Michael, growing up and into your life now, I'm sure there are countless examples that you can think of. But when you look back on your life, what is one happening that you see as really playing a pivotal role in making you into the man you are today?
Well, I would say it's two things. When I'm a superintendent, I'm a father of a lot of children at home, and I see things through multiple lenses. Certainly as a parent, certainly as an educator, special education parent as well.
Mhm.
Um, the one thing that's shaping me and making me think things in a different way, I would say two things: what's happening internationally in schools around the world, and what are universal best practices that we can bring to our schools. I think that's very important. And the second thing is mental health issues with our kids, and not only kids, but with our staff, and the stigma that's attached to it, and what we need to do that's new and different within our schools, and how do we address that? How do we support our students and staff with those particular issues? And that shaped me into more of an advocate. I would say, much more than anything, I'm cheerleader in charge. I'm also, as far as I have my vision and mission and core values, all of that means nothing if people, as John Maxwell says, and I know you know him very well, right? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. It's incredibly important that you do care about everyone that's there, especially their mental health. So that really shaped me over the past 5 years.
I love that. Well, and when you think about people who've played a role in your life outside of your own family, who is
Yeah.
somebody that was really pivotal in playing a role?
I would say my elementary teacher, excuse me, Mrs. Niemeyer. She's my fifth grade teacher. Uh, she's the type of teacher I am quite certain you were when you were teaching elementary school. And I know I tried to be. She didn't care just about test scores, didn't define who you were, as a student. She wanted you to be well-rounded. She wanted you, to read, but she wanted you to appreciate music and art and all those different things that were just as important. And yeah, she definitely made a major impact. I mean, she used to bring a guitar to school, and then she used to, have the kids sing. Well, walk the kids. I was one of them. Same with her, and that led me to do the same thing with my former students when I was doing that. So it's always a teacher that makes a difference, and sometimes you don't know until 10, 15, 20 years later, which is really amazing.
Being in the role that you're in now, it's so few educators get to experience what this position is like as a school superintendent. What would you say was one of your most eye-opening moments once you became superintendent?
It's almost like I can almost imagine what it's like if you are a sports junkie, right, and you realize you're the head coach of a professional football team, baseball team. The first thing must be like, I can't believe I'm doing this, and I can't believe how many people I'm responsible for, and all these different things. So for me, there isn't a day that goes by that I question if I can do things.
Right.
And I like that. I actually like the fact that I live outside of my comfort zone every single day. And so for me, I would say that's probably the biggest thing is living outside and embracing that, and no, never getting sick of it. I don't know. It's a very special, surreal thing.
Mhm.
Even though after you work in 10-hour days, 11-hour days, when you do drive home and you take your suit off and you kind of go over the day, there's a deep appreciation for the work, and not only for the work that you've done as an individual, more so the work that you do, like as far as people who are you're not at the ground level, you're about 5,000, 10,000 feet, but for our teachers, our teacher assistants, our security guards, all those different people that touch the lives of our kids, man, it's the best job in the world, if you embrace all the trials and tribulations along with it.
Well, I gotta tell you, I have much credit to you because I don't think I could do it. Even hearing you, I'm like, there are people meant for certain positions, but mentioning everything that is required, how do you stay balanced?
Yeah, well, I think there are two things. That's why like I said, I just finished writing my book, Staying Grounded, because the way you go, but you have to be very deliberate about it. You have to be in charge of your calendar. You have to be, I wake up at 4:30 in the morning every morning. I try to get at least 5-6 hours of sleep, but these rituals that you do, you have to take care of yourself first before you take care of others. It sounds very selfish, but it's really not.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, relationships, I mean, really, I can't think of anything more important than relationships and your ability to be empathetic. And if you can do those things every single day, I think you can stay grounded. And then making sure you're home, and you're with your spouse and with your kids, and being very deliberate with your time. That's incredibly important. It's not easy to do. And I read every day. All those things add up over time. And if you're consistent with those things, I think it allows you to stay as grounded as you can be.
So, I've got to say, I think I'm going to go online and apply for a job in your district. I just love hearing somebody who is in the leadership position like you have these kind of mindsets. Sometimes as educators, we can get so beat down by the system, and sometimes the people in charge don't always feel like they have the best interests of kids or adults at heart. And to hear you as a superintendent share this stuff, I feel like as teachers we often don't hear from other superintendents very often. Because I'm sure there's so many things y'all are doing, number one, but then y'all have to be so careful with everything that you say too. But just hearing this conversation with you tonight has given me so much hope for leadership positions like that, because powerful superintendents who walk the walk and mean what they say and have that positivity, they're few and far between. They really aren't. You are not the norm. And so I appreciate that you have this heart and that you're really in it for the right reasons. A question that I would love to know from your perspective is, watching all the different schools that you do and all the teachers and administrators and leaders, if there was somebody looking to enter the profession of education, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give them?
If they're entering as a teacher?
Yeah. Or, I mean, Yeah, let's do teacher. Let's say if there's somebody who's thinking, I think I want to be a teacher, from your level of having to see all these different kinds and everything,
Yeah.
what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, wow, it's a great question. I think there are two things. Yeah, I think you would agree with me. Teaching is part art, part science, right? So, from understanding what a lesson plan is, all those different things. I think most people can learn that, but to connect with kids, that you can't just go to the store and buy like connection juice and learn how to connect with kids, right? But that is the one thing I believe that you have to not be afraid to forge those connections because the kids in your class need to know that they are more than a score, that a test does not define who they are, and you genuinely care about their well-being, right? I mean, that ultimately is the most important thing. The second thing I think that our teachers need to do and our administrators need to do is understand child development. I can't underscore how important it is for us as educators to understand Piaget, what those stages are as far as how kids learn, when they learn certain things. Eric Erikson, Maslow, like those hierarchy of needs that we know about, but how much do we know? It's like usually like it's scratch and sniff. I took a course. Oh yeah, I remember Piaget. I
Yeah.
remember Maslow. Yeah, there's a triangle. But to really, I think, to make a real difference with a lot of kids, you understand where they are developmentally, and you're going to make a much deeper impact. And it's time well spent as far as I'm concerned. So relationships, the ability to listen, be empathetic, and understand child development. If you can do those things, I think there's a little secret sauce in all of that.
I love that. So when does your book come out?
Well, that's I'm hoping it comes out in the fall. So I mean, you know what it's like, right? You have to go through the editing process and all those particular things. So certainly when it's coming out in the fall, I'm hoping just before school starts, I will let you know. And I think it's for anybody who, gosh, who wants to be an administrator at some point, and certainly I think it's a good tool to have for even acting administrators right now because sometimes we need a reset to understand or to remember why we got into administration or
Yep.
to be a school leader, to begin with, because we do forget sometimes in the
Yes,
ebb
we
and flow
do.
of the ebb and flow of a school year. I mean, you know how crazy it is, right?
Yep.
So sometimes we just need a little reset, and that's the purpose.
Well, I'm excited to read it. Well, Michael, one question I always love to end these conversations on is if you had one thing, it doesn't even have to do with education if you don't want it to be. If you had one thing that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Knew or understood? Yeah. Okay. So I'll take this from a educational standpoint.
Okay.
Um, I don't think people give themselves enough credit, and I don't think enough people forgive themselves for mistakes that they make. And they need to give their permission to themselves to do that because I think in order for all of us to self-actualize and get to the best place we can be, to tap into our most potential and to find our talents, we make mistakes. And I think there's something we have forgotten how to do to embrace mistakes, learn from them, and to grow. And I really believe we need to do much more of that and to be very forgiving as we go through this journey of life because it's not easy. We need more positive people embracing that and sharing that message.
That is the perfect ending to this conversation. Well, Michael, I have admired your work greatly. And after this conversation tonight, I have a whole new level of respect for what you are doing and the way that you're impacting kids and adults, not only in your neck of the woods, but across the country over in Texas and my own life and career. So thank you so much. I know you are incredibly busy, and I appreciate you making some time to have this conversation with me tonight.
Thank you, Todd. It was a real privilege to speak with you, and I hope to speak to you again. Thanks.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out all the past episodes on iTunes, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, they are there. I hope tonight's conversation with Michael Hynes has encouraged you and inspired you the way it has with me to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.